August 6th, 1944, near Avranches, Normandy. The fog has not yet burned off the fields when Captain Robert H. Caldwell, U.S. Army Air Forces, steps out of his jeep and sinks ankle-deep into wet grass. The air smells of damp earth, crushed weeds, and something else. Old fuel, long evaporated. Ahead of him stretches a strip of uneven ground, scarred with tire ruts and bomb craters hastily filled with gravel. An airfield, or what used to be one. To the untrained eye, it looks useless. No hangars worth mentioning. A windsock hanging limp from a bent pole. A few wrecked revetments half collapsed into the hedgerows. The Germans abandoned it weeks ago during the retreat from Normandy, stripping it of anything valuable. Caldwell doesn't see ruins, he sees range. Behind him, the rumble of trucks grows louder. Engineers, fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, a mobile control tower mounted on the back of a 6x6. Men jump down before the vehicles have fully stopped, already arguing about runway length, soil firmness, drainage. How fast can we make this usable? Caldwell asks. An engineer wipes rain from his helmet. If we don't get shelled, 48 hours. Caldwell nods. Make it 24. This field, coded A12 once it goes operational, isn't on any pre-war map that matters. It won't be mentioned in speeches or painted on the noses of bombers. But in August 1944, as Allied armies surge out of Normandy and begin the race across France, this strip of land becomes something far more important than it looks. It becomes a hinge. For weeks after D-Day, Allied aircraft have dominated the skies over Normandy. P-47, Thunderbolts and Typhoons roam freely, smashing German armor, rail yards, and supply columns. But air power has a limit most people never think about. Fuel. Fighters can only loiter so long. Every mile the front advances pushes that limit harder. As Patton's Third Army punches south and east, tanks begin to outrun their air cover. Pilots report the same problem again and again. Target escaped east, out of range, out of range. That phrase worries men like Caldwell more than Flak ever did. In staff tents miles behind the lines, maps are updated daily. Red arrows show Allied advances, blue circles mark fighter coverage. And between them, a growing gap begins to appear. German units retreat through that gap. They move at night. They move under cloud. And for the first time since June, they move with less fear of Allied aircraft overhead, unless something changes. The airfield near Avranches was never meant to matter. Built by the Luftwaffe in 1943 as a dispersal strip, one of dozens meant to scatter aircraft away from bombed main bases, it had seen only limited use. By July 1944, it was already obsolete, too close to the front, too exposed. The Germans left it behind without ceremony. The Americans find it and refuse to let it stay forgotten. By the afternoon of August 6th, bulldozers are pushing earth into craters. Engineers lay down pierced steel planking, PSP, over the worst sections. Fuel lines are buried shallow, fast, and ugly. Ammunition is stacked under camouflage nets, pulled from trucks that haven't even stopped rolling yet. There is no grand opening. There is only urgency. That night, Caldwell writes in his notebook by flashlight. Field rough but workable. Priority. Fighters, not bombers, must fly tomorrow. August 7th, 1944. Dawn. The first P-47 touches down hard, bounces once, then settles. Its pilot doesn't cut the engine. Ground crew swarm it immediately, refueling while the prop still spins. Ammunition belts are fed into the wings. Oil is topped off. The pilot leans out of the cockpit. Where's the front? A sergeant points east. That way. And it's moving. The Thunderbolt roars back into the air less than 15 minutes after landing. By noon, A-12 is flying continuous sorties, not impressive ones, not dramatic ones, but constant. Every German convoy moving through the Avranches Gap now does so under a different sky. Fighters appear sooner, stay longer, strike deeper. Roads that had been relatively safe for hours at a time become killing zones from dawn to dusk, a German staff officer will later write. The enemy's air power seemed to leap forward overnight. It did, by moving the ground beneath it. For Allied pilots, the difference is immediate and visceral. Lieutenant James Red Morrison, 366th Fighter Group, notes it after his second sortie of the day. "Feels like we're sitting right on top of them now," he says over coffee, grease still on his hands. No more turning back with half a tank. That confidence changes behavior. Pilots fly lower, linger longer, hit targets they would have ignored before. German units attempting to regroup find no safe daylight window anymore, all because of a strip of ground most planners would have driven past. By mid-August, A-12 is no longer alone. It is the first of many. A pattern emerges. Capture, repair, reuse. German airfields, once assets of the Luftwaffe, become stepping stones for the Allies. Each one extends the umbrella of air cover another 30, 40, 50 miles. The sky moves with the front. German commanders begin to realize the danger too late. Destroying airfields during retreat would have slowed them further. Leaving them intact hands the enemy a gift. The forgotten airfield near Avranches is no longer forgotten. It is teaching the Allies something profound. Air superiority is not just about aircraft. It is about where they can land and how fast you can make broken ground fly again. August 10th, 1944. Somewhere east of Avranches. By the third day, the airfield no longer feels temporary. Captain Robert Caldwell stands beside a fuel truck, watching a line of Thunderbolts lift off one after another, their engines clawing at the humid morning air. The ground still bears scars, uneven patches where steel planking meets churned soil. But the rhythm is there now. Launch, recover, refuel. Launch again. War, reduced to tempo. What Caldwell notices most is not what happens on the field, but what stops happening beyond it. German movement during daylight collapses. Reports arrive from liaison officers embedded with armored units pushing east. Enemy columns abandoning vehicles at the first sound of engines. Artillery crews scattering before guns can be unlimbered. Fuel trucks burning along roads that had been safe only days earlier. The pilots have a new phrase. They're running in the open. That should not be possible. Not anymore. The German army has fought under hostile skies before. In Russia, in Italy, in Normandy itself. But this feels different, and the reason is subtle. The fighters are not merely overhead. They are persistent. Before A-12, Allied aircraft struck in waves. Powerful, destructive, but bounded by fuel and distance. German officers learned to time their movements between sorties. Wait for cloud, wait for dusk. Slip through the gaps. Now the gaps are closing. A German motorized column near Mayenne attempts a night movement on August 10th. At dawn, as vehicles pull into concealment, fighters are already there. Not passing through. Orbiting. The air cover has arrived with the ground war. At a German divisional headquarters, hastily relocated to a forest clearing, Major Wilhelm Krauss, operations officer, stares at a map riddled with pins and grease pencil corrections. They shouldn't be able to reach this far, someone says. Krauss snaps back. They couldn't last week. But last week no longer matters. Reports confirm the impossible. American fighters refueling forward, operating from captured fields, reducing turnaround time to minutes instead of hours. German intelligence notes the airfields but underestimates their significance. They are small, crude, vulnerable. What they miss is that vulnerability doesn't matter if you don't intend to hold them forever. A-12 is not a fortress. It is a springboard. Caldwell receives orders on the evening of August 10th. New sites identified farther east. Former Luftwaffe strips near Laval and Le Mans. Some bomb-damaged, some barely more than grass. "All right," he tells his engineers. "We leapfrog." The phrase spreads quickly through Allied air planners. Leapfrogging airfields. Capture one. Use it. Move on. Leave behind just enough to keep flying until the next is ready. It is logistics masquerading as improvisation, but nothing about it is improvised. This doctrine had been discussed in theory before D-Day, in North Africa, in Sicily. But France offers something different. Density. Roads. Fields. Infrastructure the Germans themselves built for air war, and now abandon under pressure. The Allies turn enemy preparation into enemy weakness. On August 12th, Caldwell visits a newly secured strip east of Le Mans. German markings are still visible on a smashed sign near the entrance. Luftwaffe fuel drums lie punctured in a ditch, deliberately destroyed during retreat. The engineers don't curse. They shrug. American fuel arrives by truck that night. A P-47 lands the next morning. The sky moves again. For the men at the front, the effect borders on surreal. Lieutenant James Morrison flies 3 sorties in one day, something unthinkable earlier in the campaign. Between flights, he eats standing up, helmet still on, while ground crew reload his guns. "Feels like we're chasing them down a hallway," he tells Caldwell later. That hallway leads straight toward the Seine. German commanders sense the trap forming, but cannot escape it. Every attempt to concentrate forces draws air attack. Every delay increases exposure. The faster they retreat, the more territory they abandon, and with it, more airfields. Each abandoned strip becomes another Allied step forward. By mid-August, Allied air cover extends deep enough that German units attempting to establish defensive lines find themselves under attack before fortifications are even complete. Bridges are destroyed not during retreats, but while still being prepared. Supply dumps vanish within hours of relocation. German soldiers begin to refer to American fighters not by type, but by time. Morning planes, midday planes. Always planes. The air war has synchronized itself with the ground war in a way the Germans cannot disrupt, not because the aircraft are new, but because the ground beneath them keeps changing. Caldwell finally allows himself a moment to reflect when he receives a report from 3rd Army headquarters. Forward air support exceeding projections. Enemy movement reduced to night only. Request continued airfield advancement. He folds the paper carefully. The forgotten airfield near Avranches has become proof, not proof of American air power, but proof of American adaptability. Air superiority, Caldwell realizes, is no longer something you achieve and hold. It is something you move. And the faster you move it, the less the enemy can breathe. August 15th, 1944, west of Paris. The distance between front line and air cover no longer exists. Colonel Etienne Morel of the French resistance crouches in a hedgerow outside a small town south of Alençon, binoculars pressed to his eyes. A German convoy, trucks, horse-drawn wagons, a lone half-track, edges along the road, engines throttled low, drivers tense. They are moving at dawn. That alone tells him everything. For weeks, German units have learned that daylight movement is a gamble. Night once offered sanctuary. Dawn was the margin. Now even that margin is gone. Morel hears it before he sees it. A deep, rolling thunder that grows into a tearing roar. American fighters sweep in low, sunlight flashing off wings, engines howling as they break formation and dive. The convoy scatters. Vehicles jackknife into ditches. Men leap for cover. The attack lasts less than 2 minutes. When it is over, nothing moves. Morel lowers his binoculars slowly. He has seen air attacks before, British raids, American sweeps, but never like this. There is no pause between strikes, no sense that the planes must depart soon. They circle. They wait. They own the sky above this road. 50 miles west, Captain Robert Caldwell stands beside a field map marked with red grease pencil arrows that seem to advance every hour. The arrows no longer represent plans. They represent reality. Paris is inside the umbrella now, an operations officer says quietly. Caldwell nods. He already knows. The leapfrogging airfields, A-12, A-16, A-22, have collapsed the geometry of the campaign. Fighters once limited by fuel now refuel so close to the front that they can loiter. Attack. Withdraw briefly. Return. The Germans had relied on space to protect them. Space is gone. At a German Army Group B headquarters, hastily relocated to a chateau near Chartres, General Major Ernst Vogel slams his fist onto a table strewn with maps. "This is impossible," he snaps. They are flying as if Paris were already theirs. An intelligence officer answers carefully. "They are flying from our airfields, Herr General." The room falls silent. Captured airfields had always been expected losses, temporary setbacks to be mitigated later. No one had considered that the enemy would turn them into weapons almost immediately. The Luftwaffe is powerless to stop it. Fighters are scarce. Fuel scarcer. Pilots exhausted. Even when German aircraft rise, they are met not by a single sweep, but by layers of Allied patrols already in place. The air war is no longer episodic. It is continuous. On August 17th, Caldwell visits a newly operational strip east of Dreux. German hangars still stand at the edge of the field, scorched but intact. American aircraft park beside them, as if they had always belonged there. A French civilian watches silently from behind a fence. "They never stop," she says, nodding toward the fighters. Caldwell smiles faintly. "Neither do we." But he knows the truth is more complicated. They do stop, just not long enough for the enemy to recover. Lieutenant James Morrison feels the change in his bones. He flies 4 sorties on August the 17th. Each time, the targets grow closer together. Columns retreating, bridges hastily rigged for demolition, artillery abandoned mid-emplacement. Between flights, Morrison watches German prisoners being marched past the airfield, muddy, hollow-eyed, stunned. One of them looks up at the aircraft and shakes his head slowly. Morrison doesn't feel triumphant. He feels relentless. The war has become pressure without release. The liberation of Paris on August 25th shocks the world. But for Caldwell and his staff, it feels almost inevitable. The German retreat had been accelerated, not by one decisive battle, but by the constant erosion of their ability to move, supply, or regroup. Airfields once considered minor, forgotten strips scraped from French soil, have rewritten the rules. Allied fighters now operate so far forward that German units retreat faster than their own planning can accommodate. Orders arrive late. Supply fails. Command cohesion dissolves. The enemy is not defeated at the line. He is defeated between lines. In a captured German report found near Chartres, Caldwell reads a sentence that stays with him. "Enemy air activity appears unlimited in time and space." Unlimited. That is not technically true, but it feels true. And in war, perception often matters more than precision. The final irony becomes clear as Allied forces push toward the Seine. German engineers blow airfields as they retreat, cratering runways, destroying fuel dumps. It does not matter. American engineers arrive within hours. Steel planking goes down. Fuel trucks roll in. Fighters land before the dust settles. The airfields do not need to be perfect. They need to exist. That is enough. Caldwell stands on a ridge one evening, watching aircraft lift off toward the east, their silhouettes dark against a red sky. He thinks back to Avranches, to the abandoned Luftwaffe strip no one had bothered to name, to the first landing on damaged ground. No one will write songs about airfield engineers. No monuments will mark steel planking hammered into French soil. But without them, the Battle of France would have looked very different. Distance would have returned. Time would have slowed. The enemy might have breathed. Instead, the sky kept moving forward, and the ground war followed. August 20th, 28th, 1944, Eastern France. The concept of a rear area no longer exists. General Major Ernst Vogel understands this with a clarity that borders on dread as he studies the morning situation report. The lines blur together, unit positions outdated almost as soon as they are written, supply columns destroyed before they arrive, roads marked impassable not by craters alone, but by fear of the sky. For decades, armies had organized themselves around depth, a front line where men fought, a rear where men rested, regrouped and planned. Air power threatened that distinction, but it had never erased it completely, until now. Captured Allied fighters are operating so close to the advancing ground forces that German staff officers can no longer identify where safety begins. A road used at dawn is attacked by noon. A forest clearing that shelters trucks at night is strafed the next morning. Movement itself has become evidence. Vogel reads a message from a divisional commander retreating toward the Meuse. Any concentration of vehicles immediately attracts fighter-bomber attack. Units dispersing into fields still suffer losses. No location can be considered secure. The implication is devastating. Dispersal, once a solution, is now merely slower death. At an Allied airfield outside Chartres, Captain Robert Caldwell reviews the same reality from the opposite side of the map. The fighters are no longer reacting to requests. They are shaping the battlefield before requests exist. With airfields leapfrogged forward again and again, Allied pilots operate on a rhythm that feels unnatural to anyone trained in pre-war doctrine. Missions are shorter. Turnaround is faster. Pilots land, refuel, rearm, and are airborne again before German units can recover from the last strike. The air war has become intimate. You don't hunt anymore, Lieutenant James Morrison tells a replacement pilot. You patrol. Targets show up because they can't hide. That difference matters. Hunting implies scarcity. Patrolling implies control. On August 23rd, near Troyes, a German armored column attempts to move under cover of fog. Engines idle quietly. Officers believe they have found a gap, a few hours where the air might be blind. They are wrong. Allied fighters from a newly activated strip near Sens drop through the cloud layer as if summoned. Rockets slam into the lead vehicles. Fuel trucks erupt. The column collapses in minutes. The survivors scatter on foot. They do not reform. They do not regroup. They vanish into the countryside, carrying weapons, but no cohesion. This is how German units die now. Not in encirclements carefully planned on maps, but in fragments, eroded by constant pressure until command ceases to exist. French civilians notice the pattern before many German officers do. In villages along the retreat routes, people whisper the same observation. German convoys no longer pass through intact. They appear in pieces, first a few trucks, then hours later scattered men, then nothing at all. The sky has become a filter. Only small, desperate movements slip through. Vogel convenes his remaining staff on August 26th. We must move at night, one officer insists. We tried, another replies. They fly at night. 2, and they know the roads. A third officer, younger and pale, says quietly, they are flying from places that were ours last week. No one contradicts him. The truth has finally settled in. Every mile of ground lost is not just territory. It is infrastructure. Airfields, fuel dumps, repair facilities. Each one captured becomes an amplifier for Allied power. The more Germany retreats, the stronger the enemy's air presence becomes. Retreat feeds pursuit. Caldwell receives confirmation of this dynamic in a report marked high priority. Enemy movement increasingly disorganized. Prisoners report belief that Allied aircraft are unlimited in number and range. Caldwell circles the word belief. It is not accurate, but it is effective. Air superiority has crossed into psychological dominance. German soldiers no longer plan routes based on terrain alone. They plan based on when they think aircraft might appear. They avoid roads even when roads are faster. They abandon vehicles that draw attention. Logistics collapses not because supplies do not exist, but because no one dares move them. On August 28th, Caldwell stands with a group of visiting ground officers watching fighters land and take off from a strip that did not exist 2 weeks earlier. One of the officers shakes his head. If we'd tried this in 42, it would have been suicide. Caldwell nods. If we hadn't tried it now, we'd be crawling. The difference is not bravery. It is momentum. In German headquarters east of the Meuse, Vogel drafts what may be his final coherent operational assessment. Enemy air forces now operate with such proximity to ground advances that traditional distinctions between tactical and operational depth are meaningless. Rear areas cannot be protected. Movement invites destruction. Command increasingly ineffective. He does not send it immediately. He reads it twice. Then he adds a line that will never make it into official history. We are not being defeated by one great blow, but by the absence of pause. As August draws to a close, Allied ground forces approach the German border faster than anyone predicted in June. The breakthrough at Normandy has not slowed. It has accelerated. And the reason is not just tanks. It is not just infantry. It is not even just aircraft. It is the way those aircraft have erased distance itself. The forgotten airfields, the ones marked briefly on maps, captured, repaired, reused, and forgotten again, have turned the sky into a moving front. There is no sanctuary behind the line. There is no waiting for the storm to pass. The storm follows. September 1st to 10th, 1944. Western Germany. The first Allied fighters cross the German border in daylight without opposition. Lieutenant James Morrison notices it immediately, not in dramatic silence, but in the absence of urgency. No frantic radio calls, no sudden flak bursts, just open sky and a river winding beneath his wings. The Rhine is ahead, and no one is stopping him. Only weeks earlier, this had been unthinkable. German airspace had once been defended in layers: radar, interceptors, flak belts, fallback fields. But those layers depended on distance, on time, on the assumption that attackers had to fly long, predictable routes from fixed bases. That assumption is gone. Morrison lands that afternoon on a rough strip just west of the border. An airfield so new it still smells of churned earth and spilled fuel. It had been a Luftwaffe auxiliary strip once, barely used, barely defended. Captured, repaired, and activated in under 48 hours. It does not even have a proper name yet. The ground crews call it the New One. That is enough. German units retreating toward the Siegfried Line feel the difference immediately. A battalion commander near Aachen radios for permission to move before dusk. The answer comes back short and bitter. No movement until darkness. Darkness arrives, and the aircraft arrive with it. Not bombers, fighters. Low, fast, precise. They strafe road junctions, shell-cratered bridges, attack anything that moves with engines or tracks. Trucks burn where they stop. Tanks are abandoned intact, crews scattering into forests. The West Wall, The defensive line German planners had hoped would buy time fills with men who arrive hungry, undersupplied, and shaken. They were not defeated in battle. They were exhausted in transit. Back at Allied headquarters, the significance is clear. Air officers do not speak of support anymore. They speak of presence. With each captured airfield, the Allies shorten the loop between detection and destruction. German movements are spotted, attacked, reassessed, and struck again, sometimes within the same hour. The battlefield has become compressed in time. The Germans cannot rest, cannot regroup, cannot plan beyond the next few hours. General Dwight Eisenhower receives a briefing on September the 4th that summarizes the campaign in a single sentence. Enemy forces are retreating faster than their command structure can function. It is not said with triumph, it is said with recognition. This is not collapse from shock, it is collapse from acceleration. German officers like General Major Ernst Vogel understand this too late. In a final conversation with a subordinate, Vogel says something that sounds almost reflective. Every kilometer we lost made them stronger. The subordinate does not reply. There is nothing left to say. The airfields that enabled this victory do not appear in victory speeches. They are not named after generals. They are not preserved as monuments. Many are dismantled within weeks, replaced by newer strips closer to the front. But their effect is permanent. They prove something that will shape modern warfare. Control of airfields is not about territory. It is about tempo. After the war, Allied analysts will write that the Battle of France ended faster than any major campaign in modern European history. They will credit armored thrusts. They will credit logistical brilliance. They will credit air superiority. All of that is true, but none of it explains how those forces stayed synchronized while moving faster than doctrine allowed. The answer lies in places most soldiers never noticed. In forgotten fields scraped flat by bulldozers, in captured Luftwaffe strips repaired by engineers under fire. In the decision, repeated again and again, not to wait for perfection, but to fly anyway. Lieutenant Morrison returns years later to France as a civilian. He stops near a stretch of farmland outside Sens. There is no sign, no marker, just crops and wind and sky. He knows this place. This used to be an airfield, he tells someone once. They look confused. It looks like nothing. That is the point. The Battle of France was not won by one decisive blow. It was won by a system that refused to let the enemy breathe. A system that turned captured ground into immediate advantage. A system that made distance irrelevant. And at its heart was an idea so simple it seemed obvious only after the fact. If you take the enemy's airfields, you take his future.